Hello and welcome to a new episode of DeFiChain Tech Talk. If you like the show, then give us a like, subscribe to the channel and click the bell button. And today it's a very special episode. I'm very happy that U-Zyn is back on stage. So we thought before the real hype around MetaChain will come, we should do a tech talk and have a look behind the scenes. And yeah, U-Zyn, welcome to the stage. Welcome back some months ago where you gave us an outlook, what's happening in the far future. Now, a couple of months later, we are in the future. Give us some insights. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for doing this, DZ. I'm really good to be back again. Happy to be sharing what the current progress is. Been working a lot behind the scene with the engineers, getting ready for the launch. Excited to share what's next.
Yeah, we thought it's kind of chat around what you're doing, what you're developing, current state, what's happening next. We have nothing to present. If you have a question, everyone watching it live, put it in the chat. I will have a look on it, and U-Zyn, you are trying to do your best to answer it, I think.
Yep, I will be happy to take questions. Surprise, surprise, I have nothing, no slides today. I have, let me just walk you through some of my agenda. I did prepare, just didn't have time to work on the slides. So I'm going to walk through on the engineering work behind MetaChain, what it is and why it's such a challenge and why it's so interesting and why we're doing something that's totally different on MetaChain. And I'm gonna walk through then on the release for beta, and I will then also share about the security and stability. I've been tweeting about that. I want to give a bit more light into what I meant by that. So, and then I will be talking about kind of a schedule on when we expect MetaChain to go live. I know everyone's waiting for that date. And then I'm going to be talking a bit on the near future, not so much on like hypothetical future, but more on the near future on what once we have MetaChain out, what it means for us and what we need to do next. So again, I have no slides, so get your pen and paper ready and take notes. Sorry about that. I got no slides. So get your pen and paper ready. Feel free to ask me any questions in the chat. Ideally in YouTube because I get to see the comments here. If not in Twitter, then DC will kind of have to monitor that and ask me later, ideally in YouTube. With that, shall I get started?
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. So MetaChain, we are at beta 10 as we speak right now, and it has been looking pretty good. It has been going around for a while. It's been 2 days now. It's looking pretty good. As of beta 9, we have not have any new feature implemented. It's all about stability and security for MetaChain for all the betas that are gonna be pushed out. I will explain a bit about what stability and security is because there has been quite a few tests and discussions and plans as well. I want to just also shine a light on what's happening kind of behind the scenes. It should not be behind the scenes, but because there are PRs and happenings as well, but just kind of like wrap it up in a more communicative way, and feel free to take. I'll be happy to like take questions and all that. With that, we'll just take on to the next one. So we did have a RC1. RC stands for release candidate last week, and it was unplanned because there has still been issues or stability around stability, especially that needs to be addressed before we can put out RC. And also, I want to explain what it means when we talk about RC. So, on software releases, we have alpha, we have beta, and then we have RC, and then we have stable node. So, alpha, we don't really do that on DeFiChain side. I mean, some software does that, but for DeFiChain, we don't do that. Beta, it's more of a feature or kind of like even some companies call it like nightly releases where you just get the latest stuff really quickly, and there might be some rollbacks. That's why Chang'e testnet was pushed out rather than using the actual testnet. And testnet is meant to be supporting services that want to build around DeFiChain to have a stable base to build on that's closely mimic the main net without having to risk any of your actual DFI or any of your actual tokens to do testing. So you do it on testnet. And the fact that there has been the rollbacks and all that are planned, therefore the developers decided that it's best to do it on a separate testnet to not affect any companies that want to build on DeFiChain to have a stable testnet to rely on. Therefore, Chang'e testnet. I should call it just Chang'e, just to avoid the confusion. So Chang'e, we have testnet, we have mainnet, right? So Chang'e is being used for beta releases. And there has been a lot of releases for beta. It's now number 10, and there has been multiple rollbacks for beta, and Nodes has not been the most stable from beta 1 to beta 9, but I think beta 10 seems to be quite stable. I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that it is stable, and then we can look into what's next. So when we talk about release candidate should be stable ready. That's the candidate for stable. There should not be any, it should not have any plan development after release candidate it's out. So release candidate should be, that's it. That should be the one. Yeah, no more changes, no more anything. We're just gonna let it sit for the next 10 to 14 days because exchanges need time to upgrade, all the services need time to upgrade. So there should not be any surprises at all when RC is out. So if you have anything that's undone, then that should not be RC, therefore we need to roll back to beta. So the fact was that when RC was out, there are still things that needs to be done, therefore it's a no-brainer that we need to go back to beta because it gives the wrong impression to anyone that follows the project, or we're ready now. And yet we are planning like RC1, RC2, RC3, and that's not good. So RC, when RC is out, it needs to accompany with a testnet upgrade, and it needs to accompany with a testnet upgrade, which means that the testnet, which is stable base for any companies, anyone that works on that, any exchanges, any services that works on DeFiChain that uses testnet to have a reliable base, it needs to accompany with a testnet upgrade to affect that base. And then we need to let it sit for, in my opinion, at least 1 week. Even that is super fast in terms of, like we talk about Bitcoin or Ethereum, like usually they let that sit for months. But for us, I think a week is probably okay if we do a lot of testing along the way. So that RC should accompany with a testnet upgrade, and then we will let it sit for a week. Let it sit meaning that all the services, they included every single services out there should try to upgrade to testnet and to see that it is stable. And the goal for RC is that the keyword is uneventful. There should not be anything that happens on RC. That should be it. Should be stable. 1 week later, we release a stable node release, and then the countdown starts on 10 days, 10 to 14 days. That's usually kind of like the safe time for exchanges to upgrade. So once that's out and the stable node is followed, another 10 or 14 days, that's a hard fork. So that's kind of the schedule that we're looking at. That also means that, I mean, without talking about any development at all, so if we are stable right now, that's kind of the time that we're looking at. We need to wrap it up with RC, with a planned testnet upgrade, let's say a day later, 24 hours later or something. Maybe that's even too short because testnet, there are other master nodes as well. So we need to get everyone to upgrade. So that's a 48-hour window or 3 days window. Once that is out, everyone upgrades, should be uneventful. Everything is stable, everything is fine. All the Ocean testnet works, all the Light Wallet works, everything works. Everyone's like, yay, it's stable. And then a week later, mainnet node is released, hard fork in about 10 days, minimum 10 days. So that's kind of what we're looking at. If there are any development work needed, then that will affect a bit of the timeline. So that's the overall gist of that. I really hope that everyone puts in the testing for beta. Testing comes in two forms as well. One, it's from the user side where it's a bit more unstructured in a way that you test whatever. So you test integration with your service, you try to do some calls, or there's a load increase, there's a memory leak where the memory just keeps going up, doesn't go down, that's bad. So all these things needs to be picked up by users and do a lot of testing. And there's also structured tests. I'm going to walk through on that, on what it means by security and stability, things that we have been really closely monitoring and making sure that they're all checked off before we start with an RC. Before I move on to the next part, is there any questions or anything you have in mind you want to?
My DeFiChain can confirm that beta 10 looks very good now regarding the stability.
That's good. It's great. Good to know.
So people are really testing with the beta software version on Chungy, and also users are testing. I think a lot of projects are building already on Chungy, trying out things, giving you feedback, what's working, what's not working. So that's currently ongoing. We are waiting for a release candidate, I understood. The idea of a release candidate is that this is also the node software later, there should be no change between release candidate and official release, right? So
yes, correct.
It should be really
release
finished.
Should be it.
Should be finished, no bugs, running stable, and that's the goal. You are working hard that we find out if beta 10 is release candidate 1 or not. That's the current work. Everyone can also help regarding the testing, and then we will see. Regarding the schedule, the timeline, I summarize what you mentioned. 1 week roundabout for a testnet update, release candidate 1, maybe additional 2-4 days in advance that everyone can prepare. Then after this 1.5 week, we release the official node software, which is more or less the release candidate. And then the exchanges needs roughly 2 weeks to update their node software before the real hard fork on mainnet can happen. Is this correct? Was this a rough timeline?
Yep, that's correct. There's some minor terminology correction. So RC is meant for testnet upgrade, and then the stable node release, which is beyond RC, is for mainnet upgrade. So at the end of that RC, then we have the stable node release. That's it's literally known as stable. So 4.0.0, and that's it. There's no other things that go behind that. And that's assuming that beta 10 is stable and ready. Spoiler ahead. I know everyone's waiting for that. There are things that are still not checked off. So I know it looks super good right now. I'm super happy to hear that it's stable. There are still things I'm going to walk through on that we still need to make sure that it's fully safe before it goes out. Again, also define fully safe doesn't mean that it's fully safe. It just safe from whatever that we can think of right now to make sure it's as safe as possible. Even that sometimes it's not possible due to some caveats, so we do have to take some stuff to work around that. So we just have to add more checkpoints along the way. I will cover a lot of that in detail.
Okay. One comment from Mario. If the release of the DeFi MetaChain needs another 1 to 3 months, it's totally fine. Better safe than sorry. So this is the way we are going. It should be stable, it should be safe, and then we can do the update on mainnet. Petty is asking, what's your opinion on the actual development and progress at the moment? Do you think everything works as planned? So that's a more generic question.
I appreciate that comment, Mario. I agree that it should be safe, better safe than sorry. There's also one more thing that I also want to point out is that it's a good engineer or I wouldn't say, I don't know what's the right term here, like a perfect engineer. Let's assume there's such a perfect engineer. A perfect engineer, if you ask him when he's going to come out, he will say never. Because it will never get to perfection, right? The software will never get to perfection. So nothing will come out. So that's also the thing that we have to strike a balance between trying to cover as much ground as possible on safety and also making sure it doesn't creep too far ahead. So engineers will always try to be, okay, we're not ready, we need more time, there's all these things we need to address. And then we need to then work with engineers to say, okay, can we have things that, if how bad that is, if it's, and also can we address those? And yeah, I mean, you cannot finish with all the safety features that you can build, but yeah, you need to be as safe as possible. That's the key thing. And Patty's question, what's your opinion on actual development progress at the moment? I think you can see on the GitHub repo itself, it's going on really extensively right now. We have releases every few days. We have code commits all the time. We have pull requests open all the time. It's going really well. And also the thing that I could share is that the known issues that we're looking at right now has a definite list. I'm happy to share that. So my goal is to check that off. And then, in my opinion, unless we discover new things that we need to cover, then I think we can go.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, I think these were all the questions regarding MetaChain current development. We have some generic questions. I don't know if we should raise them now or if you want to proceed. Yeah, what's happening?
Okay, maybe I should proceed first, and then we'll take the next question. So, before I move on to the security and stability things that we're looking at, I want to take a step back and talk a bit on. Firstly, I want to really thank the engineers for working on that. I mean, we're solving a really hard problem here. We're tackling something that's really challenging, and there has been very little compromise that the engineers are taking in order for us to do this. So yeah, thanks Prasanna and everyone in the team, Peter, and so many of them working hard on that, especially all you guys as well, testing out Klugi and my DeFiChain, all looking into taking the latest nodes and run it as fast as possible, and just that also gives us a kind of a sense of knowing that it's like it doesn't just work on a controlled environment where we know that it runs on all developers' laptop and all the servers that developers run, and we know that someone else is running it that's not controlled. That's actually it's a very comforting thing to know. Yeah. So back on that, why EVM is such a feat to the developer is the fact is that EVM is defined. It is established. It has been around for 10 years, like 9 years now. Yeah, maybe even 10 years when it's first defined. It's coming out around 2014 on Ethereum, probably defined around 2013, I would think so. So it's been around for 10 years. The fact that it is defined comes with a set of challenges. So the good thing about defined standard is that it has a lot of libraries, especially when it's been 10 years. It has a lot of libraries that you can use. There's so many different libraries that you can choose from. You don't even have to pick the one that's embedded in the Ethereum node itself. You can actually pick a lot more implementations out there in any programming language that you want. And also the fact that they have a set of tests that they have to pass before it's considered EVM makes it super safe, knowing that all these that you pick will work exactly the same way unless there are new EVM opcodes that are being added and it needs to behave differently. And then some of these libraries are not updated fast enough. So that part is helpful because we don't have to build the whole EVM from the ground up. But the thing about a defined standard is also that it comes with a set of tests that's internal, where the engine, the virtual machine needs to work exactly the same way, and then the integration around that also has to work exactly the same way. So that part is hard because we're trying to cram an existing Bitcoin based system into EVM, and that part is really hard. One example would be, I think one great analogy that I can think of would be a browser engine. So when World Wide Web came around, 30 years back. We have like Netscape, we have Internet Explorer, we have Opera, we have all these different browsers. They are working on their own engines. So everyone renders things differently. And then W3C came around, unrelated to Web3, just World Wide Web Consortium. So they defined that standards on how HTML, how CSS has to behave. And the good thing is that now all the engines behave the same way. But the next hard thing right now is that it becomes so hard for anyone to implement a new engine because there's all these set of rules that you have to fulfill, including the bugs as well. So some of that stuff that are defined in there, well, because of bug that was in the earlier days, so it was defined in there. So today, you don't even get browsers that are independent of one another anymore. Everyone's just using Chromium these days, and there's only like, I don't know, like 2 probably known rendering engines on browsers. So I sidetrack a little bit just to give that analogy on why it is harder. So what we do here, we pick a Rust-based virtual machine that cram it into DeFiChain, and the things that are around that, like RPCs, it needs to pass a set of tests that work exactly the same way, even though the block doesn't even function the same way. For instance, the number, the hash that builds up the block hash, it's very different on how a Bitcoin block or DeFiChain block hash would be, and that doesn't pass the test. So we need to write a translation to make it pass the test. Therefore, it would behave in an expected way for tools that expect EVM implementation to work a certain way, which means that MetaMask and Explorers and all that expect all the EVM blockchains to work a specific way. And then this monster of a blockchain that has EVM in there but doesn't behave the same way is not going to be MetaMask compatible. And then the decision for developers or the ecosystem would be, do we build a MetaMask clone, or do we want to be as compatible to MetaMask as possible? So there was the baseline that we draw from the first day, that we want to be as compatible to MetaMask as possible, including like as much as possible all the way if possible. The reason is because MetaMask is so widely adopted. If we want to increase DeFiChain's adoption, we want to be as compatible to MetaMask as possible. So therefore, that's like a no compromise to us. We have to adapt to whatever MetaMask expects. We need to pass all of that test. And that part is done. So we've passed all of that test. And there are things where when we cram EVM into a UTXO-based blockchain, where there are things that are different, like how the hash is done and how certain states have to be modified without going through a regular transaction. So I will explain a bit more about that in the safety thing that I'm going to talk about. Yeah, so that's why it's such a challenge. And the other thing as well, I also want to point out that DVM, the thing that we have, DeFi virtual machine, I mean, it was coined, this term was coined after when we were talking about EVM to differentiate between what we have and EVM. So DVM comes with its own set of challenges. And we want to start with a clean code base as much as possible. Ideally, if we don't have this baggage that we have on DVM, we would start with, let's say, a Rust-based code base and everything's super clean, everything's super nice. But DVM itself, it is its own monster. Like it comes with its own. It's a Bitcoin code base, but it has so much add-ons along the time, and that part is still fine. But it's a lot of these quick successions of defibs and bugs along the way, and all these features that were added, and all these hard fork blocks that are hard coded in there. Like, okay, if you see this block, then it needs to behave this way. After this block, it needs to behave this way. So actually, the blockchain itself, if you sync a DeFiChain block, like the behavior from a certain point in time keeps changing along the way with every hard fork, right? So that part, it makes it a challenge to start afresh. So therefore, I mean, there has been consideration about starting afresh as well, but that part is hard because all these bugs has to be carried over because they are now a feature, right? So it needs to be carried over and also blockchain. We also know a few exchanges actually do not take snapshots, and good on them. They don't take snapshots because snapshot is bad, right? You're just trusting someone else's snapshot. There are some exchanges who are so dead set on not taking any snapshots. You need to sync from block one. I know Bittrex does that, so good on them. So yeah, so every time we have a hard fork, they have to sync from block one, and it takes quite a while for them to sync. So all the nodes that are released on DeFiChain side has to be compatible with all the hard forks along the way, all the features along the way. Yeah, so all that becomes a set of challenges. So to put it simply, defits do add up, and they are costly to our development, especially when we're taking such a big project that we need to, as much as have a clean base to start with. So all these defects do add up. So when we need to try to cram in something into an existing code base, that becomes a big challenge. So I have to give you an idea, some of the scope on why this is a bit of a challenge. And there's also been discussions before where should we do side chains? I think some of the blockchains out there actually do side chains because you don't have to then cram everything into that. But there are a couple of reasons why DeFiChain doesn't end up doing side chains. First is because if you do side chains, we lose a lot of benefit about having the same block with multiple virtual machines, because I think that's the big thing for DeFiChain moving forward, because we can now talk natively to Bitcoin. We can also know the native tongue of Ethereum, so we can connect to them directly, and we will see a lot of benefit moving forward with this. So we make a conscious decision of not doing sidechain, because sidechain involves bridge, and that comes with its own set of challenges. So, and also we want to tie in with a good narrative about DeFiChain where it's consistent along the way, where we have a base layer where it's compatible with Bitcoin, and we have another layer that's compatible with Ethereum. So that's kind of the line that we draw. I'll pause a bit here before I move on to the challenges. I've quite a list of them. I'm going to walk through as simple as possible so that everyone understands the thing that we're looking at to make sure it's safe.
Yeah,
any questions here?
I think not on topic. I tried to summarize what you now explained. Yeah. So EVM is a standard, has some advantages. Yeah, everything is defined. You have libraries. All interfaces are clear. The big disadvantage is it's not flexible. Yeah, we cannot adapt it. It is like it is, and we have to more or less build around. The other thing was our DeFiChain DVM was changing over the blocks over the time, and must be adaptable then, or must be suitable for this construct of an EVM standard. Yeah, and that made it really hard for you to implement it. Our goal was to have the same blocks, yeah, not a sidechain. That's very good. I think that's really a great feature, and we can benefit in future from it. But yeah, that was the issue why it took so long to build it. Was this correct?
Yes, that's a really good summary, DC. Thanks for that.
Great. Good. No questions.
All right.
Yeah, you can.
All right, I'm gonna move on to the heavier part without any slides. So get your pen and pencil ready and pen and paper ready, and take note of that. I know there will be summary on tweets coming from the community member later. I thank you guys in advance for that. Yep. So let's start. So there are a couple of points that we're looking through for security and stability for DeFiChain today. Again, just to reiterate, feature-wise, it's complete right now. There's no more features that's being added. It's all about making sure that we're stable and secure when the first block was mined. So one of the things which we internally call it, I think you can see some of the PRs that mention Indianness. So it's spelled ENDIAN. That's a computer science term that refers to how an integer is represented in binary form, because every number it's represented in word, and then word is like 8-bit if I'm not mistaken. So if you have a number that's larger than that, do you do the part, we're taking it for granted because a lot of that it's shielded by the OS, and a lot of that it's done, it's shielded by the libraries that are used. Also, the fact is that even down on the chip level, on the ARM chip or versus the Intel chip, it's done completely differently on that. I forgot which is big and which is little, and that hasn't been a problem for a long time, and yet now for the first time having a problem with this because there's two different things that we're trying to cram together here. One is that the hash of Bitcoin block and Ethereum block does take a factor of Indianness into the hash. So the hash, we do realize that the hash doesn't match the standard that I talked about earlier, where it doesn't pass one of the EVM tests if we do it a hash certain way. So it needs to be then tweaked around the byte to make sure that it fits the test. But once I say that, I hope you do see the problem with that already, because once I say that, it feels super uncomfortable for me already, because once you start tweaking the byte around, it's such a dangerous thing to do that, to just make sure that the test pass. Because if you overdo it, you're going to see a crazy issue. Like, this could be totally exaggerated, but I just want to illustrate how big this, if done wrongly, could be. One Satoshi of DFI could end up becoming, I know, like 10,000 DFI, or the worst is like one Satoshi Bitcoin could end up becoming 10,000 DBTC. So that's the worst part. If we flip it wrongly, we could end up in that situation. So we do have to flip, because in order for us to pass the rigid test of EVM, especially around tools that build around them that expects block hash to be a certain way, we do have to tweak around, but we have to tweak around to make sure we don't over tweak, like the balance is over tweaked, and then all these things got to cause huge problems if it's uncatched. So all this has to be done safely. And then the other thing is, now the code base itself, you look into that, it has two core programming languages. There's C++, which is the original Bitcoin code base, and now it has Rust. So Rust comes with a lot of the upside, a lot of good stuff around it. It comes with a lot of the compile time safety. The fact that Rust is a really good system language, because if you manage to get Rust to compile, it's actually a lot harder to create a runtime error, because Rust makes sure that all the foreseeable errors are being handled before it even allows you to compile. Again, one example, I know this Tech Talk, so it feels like I have the license to get a bit more geeky here. Just bury me if you don't understand. I'm happy to take question. I'm happy to dump it down as well. So one example would be, if you write a switch statement for programming, right? You write the switch, and switch basically just maybe just an if statement, just make it easy. So okay, it has to be switch, right? So you do a switch, basically just a case, right? Switch color, if it's blue, therefore you do this. If it's red, therefore you do this. If you compile that, literally the thing that I said on C++ or JavaScript or any other language out there, it's going to be fine. Let's compile. And then when you run that code, when it hits a color that doesn't know, like black, what does it do? And now it throws an error. That's a runtime error. Whereas for Rust, it will say, okay, you do not handle black. What do we do when black comes? So we don't allow you to compile. So that's the reason why Rust is such a safe language. So, but by cramming into that, it's a clash of two different behavior, where C++ you don't have to deal with all of that, Rust you have to deal with all of that. So that part makes it really hard to make sure it works together. But the cool thing about Rust and C++ is that they both compile to the same base machine code, where they are actually compatible on the lowest level. But on the compiler level, that's where it's a different ballgame. C++ is a lot less safe, Rust is a lot safer. But all these things add to the weird, which we sum it up as the endianness safety issues, where the primitives are captured or stored differently on the system level. So now the funny thing is that, and also the very dangerous thing is that whenever we tweak something, when the developers tweak something where it fixes one of the endianness issue, we see 20 different tests that fail. It shows how grave how dangerous this is. If you tweak something that's wrong, 20 different things fail. So this part to be done correctly to ensure that everything is flipped around correctly and all that is safe. So this is the core part. Last I checked with Prasanna, I think we are quite close to completing this. So that's good news. We're not 100% yet. I think we're probably, I don't know, 80, 90% according to Prasanna. Last I checked with him early yesterday. So that's one thing. And second thing, if you look into the code base, we have not have a passing unit test for the last 3 months. And that's not good. That's not good. We don't have a base that we know that it's safe. So if we cannot release anything where we don't have a safe base that we know that's a baseline that is safe. So that's also the base requirements for us to have release candidate. We need to pass unit tests that we previously written, and any failure needs to be checked properly. Why is it failure? Because it behaves differently, or is it safe and all that? We need to have a safe base. So that's another key thing that needs to be passed before we can have release candidate. And the third thing is, for those who tried out beta or Changi, you probably have tried out this feature. It's called transfer domain. So transfer domain, what it does is there's DVM and it's EVM. You need to get the tokens going from one DVM to EVM and vice versa. And all of the blockchain transactions that we have so far are what I term push transaction. It means that you sign a transaction proving that you own what you have, and then you push it out to someone else. Here's my Bitcoin. I proved that I own that. Here's my Bitcoin. You take it. Here's my DFI. You take it. And that's how it works. But because of the thing that I described earlier, that we have a rigid structure for EVM that it needs to fulfill, so that it works on MetaMask, it works on all the Ethereum side integration, we cannot do a push from EVM over to DVM, because if we do a push, MetaMask said, what the hell? That's not EVM address. I don't even know what's that. So that's not a valid transaction. So that does not work. So what can we do is we can actually change the DVM side to support to support now what is known as pool, because we need the tokens coming back from EVM into DVM. It's now a pool. And that's when it becomes dangerous, because pool means that you cannot now prove that you have control of that address. So how can you prove you have control of that address but not revealing the private key to that address? Because it's easy, you can say, okay, I have control of that address, I give my private key here, therefore I can validate it's the same private key, and therefore I control the address, therefore I can pull. But you cannot reveal that, so that's the hard part. And it has to be done very, very safely. We have been exploring, I've been whiteboarding with the team as well multiple times to see, can we do a push from EVM to DVM? Because I would feel super safe if we do that, because you prove that you own that fund. Now you do a pull. How can we be sure that like someone else cannot pull someone else's account? And that's so bad if we do that wrong. So the way that it works in a nutshell is that also a bit of a crash course on how Bitcoin blockchain works. Is that when you, the address itself is not a public key. The address that you use on DeFi or Bitcoin is a hash. It's a hash of a hash of a public key. So when you try to spend a coin, you are actually revealing the public key. And the fact that you can move that coin also shows that you do control that private keys, and you re-sign with the public key, reveal the public key, and therefore sign with that. So the thing that we have to do to make sure that the pool is done correctly is that public key should be able to be hashed into the EVM side address. Therefore, knowing that it is the same address, therefore can be pulled. And if you follow my explanation right there, there's an issue. There's a potential pitfall if it's not done correctly, because when Alice spends her coin on DeFiChain, she also reveals her public key. So therefore, a malicious actor, Bob here, can say, okay, here's the public key of Alice. Therefore, I'm going to pull the fund from Alice's EVM address. And that's bad because Bob doesn't have the actual private key of that public key. So it needs to be done correctly to make sure that that part of the transaction is still secure, that the public key is actually correspond to the private key of the spender on the DVM side. Therefore, you can pull the fund on EVM. So this part is working now. Is it completely safe yet? We're still reviewing that. We're trying to write a lot of edge cases around it to make sure it's done correctly and completely safe. Yeah, so that's, I just want to let everyone to understand the hard thing about doing pool, and it's also very dangerous. So you need to do it absolutely correctly. Yeah, the fourth thing, it's a migration. So we have to stay, on DVM. We wanna, when we launch EVM, when we launch MetaChain, it needs to come with some connection to the DVM side. If it's completely, it's easy to do a completely separated one where it's just EVM and you have to move all the DFI over and no token moved over, or you have to start a new token. But it feels disconnected where there's no DBTC that's been brought over, it just makes it so not fun and yeah, kind of disconnected. So we want to connect all of that. So the fourth challenges will be migration. I think it's only just being fixed on beta 9, so we're still testing it on beta 10 to make sure it's fully secure. So migration means that all the current DATs and all the current assets on the DVM side, on the very first block when EVM created, needs to be migrated over to the EVM side, and then comes the next challenge. It really also ties back into how EVM expects a certain behavior. When every action on EVM side requires a TXID to effect something. So it needs to come in an actor to do something. So therefore, when the migration happens, we need to create all these DST20 smart contracts on the EVM side without having to have masternode control any private keys, because that does not work. So that has to be kind of injected into that first block in a way that also have to create some sort of a TXID that validates on the EVM side and make sure it's completely secure, and also outside the masternode cannot be recreated by any malicious actor to create a fake injected into the blockchain in a fake way. So that part is also a big challenge. Also because EVM is such a defined thing where we need to fulfill. Yeah, so that part is tricky, and we just got that addressed on beta 9. So and that's also why on testnet it's going to be super key to observe how the transition happens before the upgrade. So if upgrade successfully, then everything's good. And if you're testing it out, help to try to inject that as well. See if that works. If that works, that's bad. And yeah, we need to make sure all of that is safe. And the fifth thing I have on my list, I have a couple of things. I'm just gonna try to. It's kind of like, yeah, it becomes easier, less severe. I think. Just want to cover the key ones. The fifth thing, Explorer states, right? So Explorer, EVM Explorer, there's so many out there. We have Etherscan and a lot of open source one as well, and Explorers also indexes tokens. If you understand how EVM works, token is not a real thing. It's not a thing on EVM side. There's no even DST20 when EVM came out. DST20 is ERC20 is basically just a standard way to represent a token. It's not even a thing on EVM side. But what it is actually a state on the individual smart contracts of the token. So Explorer, what Explorer is trying to do and what your wallet is trying to do is that it try to keep tracks of all these different tokens, and all these different tokens are its own individual smart contracts. So basically, it's a state there, and there's no such thing as get account or get account balance that we have on DeFiChain side, because there's no such thing. It's basically you're querying each individual smart contract for what's the balance of this address. You can't ask an EVM blockchain what's the balance of this address, because there's no such thing. So the thing about that is that Explorer does all that indexing for you, but when we do any state injections, it does not fulfill what the Explorer expects EVM blockchain to work. We can do state injection because the masternodes control the states, when you do a pull, when you do a push, we can inject it on the smart contract side. It doesn't come with TXID, doesn't come with event lock, but Explorer will look weird. Like, okay, if you go to, let's say, MetaScan and Google your account balance on EVM side, you're gonna realize that, oh, it doesn't match with what MetaMask sees, because MetaMask actually creates the balance on the actual contract itself, whereas Explorer, they cannot go through every single contract and keep track. They have to index that, so that will not match. And at one point in time, there has been debate: should we compromise on that to say that Explorer is not the actual correct balance? You have to get a MetaMask to get a correct balance, but then that doesn't allow you to check whether it's just harder for you to do anything useful when you don't have a Explorer to fall back on. So we therefore conclude that we do need to also emulate the lock that Explorer expects. Therefore, they will be able to keep up with all that state. So that part's a little tricky. And yeah, all these things, Explorer state, as far as I know, is still not there yet. So today, if you go to MetaScan, you will see the address balance doesn't match, especially when you do a domain transfer. It does not match with your MetaMask balance because of this exact problem. So it still need to be addressed. Yeah. Yeah. So there's so many different challenges. Can we build a safety layer around that? Personally, I call that a layer 2 accounting checks, where we have every tokens on DeFiChain post MetaChain exists in 3 states. In UTXO, that's only DFI, but we need to cover that anyway. DST on the DVM side and DST20 on the EVM side. It comes in 3 states. Obviously, we can have all the checks internally to make sure that they're all safe, but can we do something on the higher level, on layer 2 accounting check, to make sure that they all stay intact, there's not being inflated anywhere, there's no bug anywhere that inflates the token? So we want to have an accounting check to make sure that there's something in the node that checks for token balances across all the 3 layers to make sure that they're completely matched. If they mismatch, if they does not equal to 0 across all these 3 blockchains, then it has to invalidate block. So that's a layer 2 thing that has to be embedded in the blockchain to make sure it's completely safe. So these are the safety tools that needs to be there to make sure it's completely safe. Other things that I could just, I know it's getting a bit heavier and getting a bit long now. Other things that I could cover are like ocean, jellyfish, light wallet testing. So we have been testing to make sure that we are compatible with EVM tools like MetaMask and tools around EVM side. But what we have not tested is on our side of things, the DVM side of things, the ocean, jellyfish, light wallet. If we need to make sure that they're there and ready when the hard fork happens, because without that, it's gonna be a developer-only blockchain for I know like a month or so, and everyone will be excluded from that. It would not be fun. So we want to avoid that situation. Mainnet sync is another thing. We want to sync from block number 1 to make sure it can sync all the way through. And another thing on the list is the state. So every EVM state is also, if you know how computer software works, like most of the time things are happening in memory. Therefore, when you alter a state, it happens in memory. If it crashes, all that's gone, right? Memory is just temporary, it's ephemeral. So all that's gone. So what you have to do is periodically flush that to the disk. So this part is also to be tested to make sure it's completely safe, to make sure that if a node crashes, it can recover itself and not lose any data. So, and not cause any like state mismatch and all these weird things. So all these things need to be there. So all in all, feature is done. We're not putting any more features. It's completely sealed. All these things need to be done to make sure it's completely safe. So if you're a software developer, do help us to test all of these things. And even if you don't know how to test these individual issues, do any random testing anyway. It helps to know that you run infrastructure on your side and it's stable. Give feedback to tweet about it. Give feedback to Discord or Telegram. I know Fabio relay that to developers, especially to me. We know you get feedback from him from time to time. That gives us a feedback on how community is testing it, and it gives also a sense of assurance that people actually do look into all these things. So yeah, I have one more segment to go, which is what's next. But before that, any question or any summary from you, DZ?
That was a really hard part, heavy tech. I cannot summarize because it was several points. I think it makes really clear what you are doing. You're not sitting and relaxing. You are working heavily on all the topics. There's one comment from xnoob.com. You must be dreaming about this stuff at night because it sounded so hard, to manage it, to work on. Thanks for that. Related questions, I think not.
Thanks. For me, yeah, it does keep me up at night, but the key things I want to make sure it's as safe as possible before the first block is mined. I don't want to have any foreseeable issues that could happen. I just want to be able to sleep at night and not have to wake up like 4 a.m. because we have like blockchain stall or we have like some mismatch on the states.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. Cool. Before that, I just want to be a bit of forward looking. I know all this is a bit of a bit grim. I don't know how you guys take it. It can seem a bit grim here, but I want to show you that all these things are there because we want to make sure it's as safe as possible. The past, I would say the last 3-4 months, a lot about features, make sure that they're implemented correctly, they can run fine on MetaMask, and all of you tested that it's running fine on MetaMask. But now it's to make sure that it's as safe as possible for things that we don't see on the surface. We want to make sure that on the node itself doesn't get corrupt and all that. So, cool. A bit on the forward-looking sides to add a bit on the upside. So, post MetaChain, now we have a blockchain that that speaks Bitcoin and also speaks Ethereum. So it's like a droid on Star Wars universe that can speak multiple languages. So that's super cool. And now the thing that we're always talking about, right? Where DeFiChain is all about connecting Bitcoin and Ethereum, and also eventually other virtual machines out of blockchain as well. So that's so that'll be super exciting. And moving forward as well, by having this, we will be having a lot more user level or community level kind of dApps that's happening, and we're already seeing that like more than 20s now on DZ's list last I checked. Super exciting. And that separates the core blockchain itself from the services around on top of that. So therefore allowing the blockchain team, Prasanna's team, to focus a lot more into adding more features, adding more connectivity to other blockchains, be able to do a lot more things without having to worry about like tokenomics and all these things that should have been on the dApp level. So I think with this, if we do this right, we're gonna have a lot more innovation happening on both fronts. Right? We have blockchain innovation is happening on the core level, and we have a lot more community dApps and all this innovation is happening around on the dApp level, where it doesn't need to have any hard forks or implication on the blockchain side. So it allows us to move so much faster. So for me, I'm really bullish about that on DeFi because I know the last 3 years has been exciting for us because we have this native thing, and now from the next month onwards, I hope we're gonna have like a lot more innovation coming up from our front. We have if we do this right, we have all these updates on community that a lot more focus will be on community projects where we can talk about all these innovations coming on the community projects, and then on the blockchain side we can talk about how we can really talk the Bitcoin side, how can we talk to the Ethereum side. And just to add a bit of that, I talked about the space elevator in my earlier talk and all that thing, but it's a bit more, I think it's a bit far-fetched, but I want to bring it a bit closer to what I've been thinking about a lot. So if you follow my tweets and all that, I've been really active on the Bitcoin side of things, on top of DeFiChain, obviously, also on Bitcoin side of things, where I do a lot of Ordinal stuff, a lot of Bitcoin development, also thinking about how to build decentralized Ordinals, exchange, and all these deep, I would say more of a deeper Bitcoin stuff. But that helps a lot because we have this blockchain that's completely native to Bitcoin side. So now with this renaissance of Bitcoin developer cultures going around, how I do foresee DeFiChain being the layer 2 for Bitcoin smart contracts layer. So what it can mean is that because DeFiChain now supports smart contracts, you can write smart contracts on DeFiChain side, and having it run and affect the Bitcoin side based on the smart contract logic. So that, I think, it's a huge win for us if you can do that and have it native connection without going through any trusted bridge. It should be as trusted as possible. I see us doing optimistic roll up to Bitcoin smart contracts, providing smart contract capability to Bitcoin. I think this is a huge win because compared to Ethereum, I know we want to eventually connect to Ethereum, but on the Ethereum side, they are more complete in general. Like, do they require Bitcoin connectivity? Ideally, yeah, but do they need it? I don't think so. But does Bitcoin side need smart contract capability? I would say that's a hell yeah. So if you can do that in a safe way, in a trustless way, I'm pretty sure we can attract a lot more interest from the Bitcoin developer resurgence that we're already seeing. A lot of developers coming back into Bitcoin now. They're going to be looking into ways to build smart contracts on Bitcoin side. They're going to look into how we can extend Bitcoin a lot more. We see proposals coming on Bitcoin side every couple of days, and I'm trying to keep track of them as well. I also put up a few as well on Bitcoin side. So eventually, once you manage to do this, the next thing we should look into is to connect directly into Bitcoin and provide smart contract capability. And I see that's entirely possible once you do this. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of my talk here. I hope you get out of that kind of like understanding about what's going on behind the scene and what's looking forward in the near future that's like really real and not something that's more hypothetical. Like hypothetically, yeah, we want to connect all different blockchains, we want to provide all the services, but in the near future, I do see us providing smart contract capability to Bitcoin. I think it's a real layer 2 for Bitcoin. I think that's a real future to look ahead to. And for me, I'm really bullish on DeFi. I mean, the market also shows that. I think that's super. That's not me, by the way. Just buying. I mean, but I mean, it's all organic. I'm just super happy to see that people are more optimistic now about DeFi. Happy to take any questions along the way.
So thanks a lot, U-Zyn. I never thought about smart contracts on Bitcoin. I have to think through, but sounds really interesting. Like you mentioned, there's no opportunity so far, yeah, and it would be a USP for us to have the opportunity. Great. I think topic-related questions are not. Maybe we can have a look on the more general questions from the community. If you have a couple of minutes, they want to ask you the one or other thing. There was one off-topic question regarding you as a person. Do you have time to attend a UFC fight night in Singapore at Saturday?
Are you coming, Mark? I might skip that. I mean, this is a personal thing. I have been a huge fan of MMA for over a decade, and I kind of slowed down last 1.5 years or so because of all these things that's going around. And I attended a couple of fight nights on UFC and also on ONE FC a couple of times. And for me, I kind of enjoy a bit more on TV. I know that's to a lot of people that's kind of weird, but for me, because I get the commentary and I just feel a bit more more hyped. And when I go to that fight, it's kind of like it's all silent and you don't just like nothing going on. It's all silent. You just have to focus on what's going on that fight. I see that a bit. Yeah, it's a bit. Maybe just me. But if you're here, Mark, happy to catch you and for coffee or catch you after the fight or something.
Okay, a question from DeFiChain Info regarding buy and burn bot. Yeah, there was a technical issue and it's now paused. The question was if you can do it in a manual way, swapping the DFI and burning it.
Yeah, it is. It is technically possible as what you described. The key things to consider is one is developer resources. Do we want to spend time to that? Second thing is also on the ocean stability. Do we want to have something, because ocean right now is quite unstable because of all these upgrades that we have. And we're now looking into upgrading ocean as well. So for that, if I can, personally, I would just hold it back until we get MetaChain out, and then we do that again.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Christian Pedersen, I think he's asking the things several times regarding Taproot, Bitcoin originals, like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that a lot of the developers, especially Peter Bushnell, if you don't know Peter Bushnell, he's one of the original Bitcoin devs that's also working on DeFiChain. He has been pushing for us to adapt Taproot on DeFiChain. So that's on the roadmap. And if we are to support on nodes, we need Taproot support. So it is on the roadmap. It's at the right time again right now to do this. I would say no, because there's so much base that has to be altered to do that. So once you got a stable base again, then we're going to look into supporting Taproot, and that will be quite a major thing to implement, because our Bitcoin code base on DeFiChain has been around for the last 2 years, and then to make the matters worse, Bitcoin actually had a major refactor on how the code base is written, maybe about 1 to 2 years back, and if you do a upstream pull, you go see a huge difference, and it affects DVM, it affects EVM as well. So that's why it's not so easy.
Yeah, understood.
But something that I would love to do personally as well, because I'm a Bitcoiner as well.
Yeah, Bitcoin. Here, next question: atomic swap function. Is it coming back?
I think it should come back. It should come back. It has been safe for a while now. Yeah, I think it should come back. Need to talk to the actually, we could potentially even submit a DFIP to ask for the vote to see should we re-enable it at its existing state. So yeah, if everyone feels comfortable, then we should bring it back in again. Personally, I think it's looking quite good now.
Thanks. XL Stege also had a question yesterday in the news show. Ledger connection, yeah, it was on the roadmap some time ago, and we heard nothing. What is here the current state?
I have not looked into that for a while, but with DMC, I hope someone in the community can look into potentially connecting DMC side over to Ledger. If you've done that, please tweet about it and show out. I would really be curious to know if it works on the DMC side. I would think it should.
Okay, thanks. So, question is it possible to do the hard fork for the USD staking before the DeFi MetaChain? Makes no
highly
sense,
not advisable right now. Yeah, highly not advisable right now. Precisely for the things that we talked about. Yeah, the more these are also known as features. The more features that push in, the more it takes another step back on making sure that things are stable. So I would not do that right now if possible.
Great. That were the more general questions here in the chat. Thanks. Yeah, for joining the show, giving us some insights. It was a real tech talk, especially in the middle part was heavy tech stuff. I could follow you on the one or other side. Sometimes it was really in detail, but shows what you are doing. Yeah, you are spending a lot of effort that the EVM layer is running safely on top of our DeFi chain. And regarding the timeline, we need now a couple of weeks. Depends a little bit on beta 10 version. Is it stable or not? Then we have the release candidate, testnet update, and then the stable or the official node software for mainnet. We have to wait again for the hard fork that everyone can update. And then finally, MetaChain is live and all the projects can build on it. Really looking forward to it. I think that's a really game changer for DeFiChain. I also said it to Prasanna, in the crypto space, people always expect something new. They cannot wait a year or something like that. And with the EVM layer, every project can build. So we see several projects coming. Something is new on DeFiChain, and the core developers can focus really on the base level without having this pressure brings something new, because there's something new will happen on MetaChain. Really looking forward to it.
Exactly. Thanks for summing up, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. So on the beta side, we're looking at beta 10 right now. If it's all stable, I think we should have one more because of some of the features I talked about. If it's all stable, that's a good base, and the things I built on top would not be too much of a change. So ideally, fingers crossed, beta 11 should be the final one. And then we're looking at then RC for a week, and then another, and then node release, and then the countdown starts 10 days. Then we have a mainnet hard fork. So fingers crossed. Personally, I think I'm looking at September. I think it should be September. I don't see us going beyond that. So if you're building, continue to build. If you're running any DeFi infrastructure, please help us to test, help us run beta 10, beta 11. Any feedback, any even good things, bad things, and also good things, please let us know what's up, because good things also help us to know that you've done it, enough people have done that, and we also get a reinforcement that to the developers, especially to know that it's safe. Personally, I'm really looking forward to making DeFiChain the layer 2 for Bitcoin smart contract layer, and I really see that happening. So yeah, that's a takeaway for me. Hope you get something there.
Okay, nothing to add. Thanks for joining, everyone out there.
Thank you.
Have a great time, and see you soon here on the channel. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
DZ. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.